Hey, what's up, guys? Node Investor here. Finally seeing a little bit of green in a few names in the altcoin markets, but Bitcoin remains relatively range bound here. So I want to give a quick update, point out some specific values, price points that I'm looking at from a Bitcoin price perspective, both on the long side as well as the short side. But I'm going to be pointing out some alts, a few setups that I'm seeing here in the very short run, just kind of looking over the next day or so as some of these alts continue to bounce from their very oversold, extreme washed out levels. But at this point, I've said it again and again, that's all I'm expecting is a bounce here until the bulls can show a little bit more momentum. We're a long ways from seeing confirmation of that, but in the near term, I am leaning bullish, but I'm also very cautious here as we are bouncing basically right into resistance right now. So you can see here on the daily chart, we have this attempt here over the last couple of days, last week or so, to transition out of this big downtrend that we've been in. So the market, if you zoom in a little bit, you can see it's been pretty much sideways. It's been very choppy, no doubt about that, especially the last few days. Very volatile, very choppy. And so if you're looking at anything from a 4-hour or daily chart, you can see it's basically just gone sideways. It's been up, down, up, down, up, down. We did hold the lows. Certainly in the shorter term time frames, if you're trading 1-hour charts or something, there are some absolute trades to be made along the way. But over the last day or so here, it's just been sitting tight. We had that live stream yesterday. Things were trying to break out. And then Bitcoin had a pretty big reversal to the downside, but it did find some support just below 6,300. And so far it's been holding. What's been happening now is the price is starting to really consolidate. You're getting a little bit of a symmetrical pattern with a series of tightening ranges as this price bounces here. And so I'm watching a couple of price points. Let me zoom out a little bit here. Going to the 4-hour chart, clear resistance above 6,500. So that's absolutely the level to be watching in the near term. If we can get above that, that would be an early signal here. So the level I'm watching is basically 6,500 to around 6,520 or so. That's going to be the first level that I'm going to be watching. You can see there's also a couple of wicks here at the very top, right at 6,600. And so closing above 6,600 would be some confirmation if you can get above this 6,500 range. And so first level to be watching on the upside is, can we close above 6,500 range and break above this resistance? That should trigger some momentum. Next test would be 6,600 or so. However, in the very short term, in the near term on these 4-hour candles, I am also watching for the potential of a double top forming here. You got a second lower high right there. So if in the next 1 or 2 4-hour candles, this starts to roll over, then the level to be watching on the downside is going to be around that $6,300 level. You'll get confirmation of a double top when it closes below 6,250 or so, but the momentum could really pick up from there. In that scenario, then I'll be looking for a retest of the $6,100 to $6,000 level at least if we see a sell-off here. So very much range bound, could absolutely go either way here in the near term. Let me clear these for you guys. We could go either way, could very much just as quickly roll over to the downside here as it could break up. Now I am leaning slightly to the bullish side just because the bulls are certainly putting up a fight here. This is the first good attempt off of the lows. There is still a relatively high open short interest. The sentiment is still very much bearish. The tone out there is very bearish, and some of the alts are trying to bounce off of these extreme levels. So in the very short term, I'm leaning bullish. I'm not taking a position just yet. I've still maintained a relatively neutral stance, but I'm looking at both options. I'm looking at a break higher, could make for a quick trade up to around that $6,800 level. A break lower could make for a quick short trade down to around that $6,100, $6,000 level. But I'm going to be a lot more cautious going on the short side right now, just because of the big drawdown that we've had already, the big pullback. I showed the daily chart going in here in the beginning. You can see we've already had several weeks of pullback. We're due for more than just a little bit of a 1 or 2 day bounce. We're due for some counter trend rally, but even then, that's all I'm going to be treating it as. So going into 6,800, 7K in that little window is going to be the key resistance level to be watching. That also lines up with some pretty good Fibonacci levels here. If you look at the bounce going peak to peak, if we bounce from here and continue to upside, the 382 level puts us right below 6,900. The 50% retracement right around 7,200. And so in and around that window is going to be really the zone that I'm going to be watching if we continue to bounce. Right now though, The first target is going to be getting above this near-term resistance at 6,500. You can see the 10 EMA on the daily is now approaching and it's pushing in. And so could this continue lower? Absolutely, right? When things get very oversold, there's a couple of ways it could play out, right? Ultimately, there's a reversion to the mean, and that happens in one of two ways. Either prices sit tight for a little bit and they go flat and let this moving average catch up, or prices bounce into that moving average. And right now we're seeing the first one, right? We're seeing this kind of sideways tight consolidation here at these lows. But if this is going to continue and be more than just that, they're going to have to really throw some upside momentum here in the very near term. So Bitcoin is in the next day or two really going to have to prove if this is going to be more than just a bounce right now, or if we're going to see another leg down and that moving average is going to put some more selling pressure and we're going to retest those lows. But looking at the alts, I do want to point out a few setups here that I'm watching, as well as just some very similar patterns across the board. Let's take a look at Ethereum first. Now looking at Ethereum daily, you can see just how dramatic that last sell-off was. Huge pullback. Now you're seeing a little bit of a bounce, but look at where the 10 EMA sits. It's still way up here at 320, 318 or so. And so that's all it is just kind of sitting tight after that big sell-off. It is still very oversold, even on the daily chart. The RSI levels did reach in the mid-teens there versus Bitcoin. Very similar. You did see a big hammer reversal bottom, but haven't seen a whole lot of follow through since then. It's trying right now, but it's just been sitting tight here at these lows, and still the 10 EMA is way up here on the BTC chart. So these are just very much oversold, and you're going to see as we go through some of these alts, many of these have the same pattern. And so all I'm looking for is these little short bounces into these daily 10 EMAs, and at that point we'll have to see how they act from there. But even then, that's, you know, that's 10, 15, 20% in some cases on a lot of those alts. But we have seen some signs of life in a few names. And so going to the market cap here real quick, you can see very quickly just in the last 24 hours there's been some pretty big pops off the lows. You see VeChain Thor up 31%, Populous having a big move, Ontology, one of the stronger names right now, Ethereum Classic, that did come off of some news from Coinbase that they're going to start trading there. And so you're seeing a few names. Lisk, I pointed that out in the live stream yesterday, continues to rally higher. And so you are seeing a few names off the lows after that extreme washout. So you're seeing some pretty good pops. Let's take a look at a couple of those. So looking at Lisk, big move off the low here over the last couple of days. If I zoom into the hourly charts, you can see this has just been stair-stepping its way higher. Had that initial pop off the low, hit the alert system, came on the radar there. First touched the 10 EMA, another big pop. Then last night we saw another pullback. And so you're seeing just this stair-stepping move here off the lows. Big volume pops though, looking pretty good here in the near term. Ontology also just starting to really drift higher, seeing some pretty good volume coming in here in the last day or so. But you can see there's some big moves here off the lows, even as Bitcoin remains in a very choppy, range-bound environment. So just something to keep an eye on here. We're starting to see a little bit of life coming off of these oversold levels. On the daily charts though, these are just tiny moves in the big scheme of things, but it's a good first sign that there's some life trying to show up here in some of these alts. VeChain Thor, big move off the low. You had a big hammer reversal candle here. Not a lot of volume, but certainly above average. But certainly there's a lot of confirmation here in the last 2 days, especially in this last daily bar. Just big move off the low. From the exact low, though, this has already had a pretty significant move, up about 78% here, almost 80% here in the last 3 days. Looking at WanChain, this is going to be a good example. There's a lot of charts that have a very similar pattern, and so just kind of showing some examples. But you're seeing these very tight consolidations here at the lows. WanChain is one of the ones that's breaking out already, but you can see these little pops trying to clear above resistance. And so the way I'm looking at these is they're just going to really bounce into the next resistance level. So in WanChain, that'd be here or here. And if you go to the daily chart, you can see that little zone right there, that resistance level that I'm looking for a bounce into, just really translates into the 10 EMA on the daily. And that's why I'm saying most of these, that's all I'm looking at, is just these bounces off the lows into resistance, but still nonetheless makes for some pretty decent quick trades if you can get them. And so I'm looking at these consolidation on a lot of these alts as Bitcoin sits tight here. You're seeing some attempts to rally above resistance. Let me look at a few more here real quick. Walton, one I'm watching right now, had a nice little low put in place. Now it's trying to move higher into the next level of resistance, which right now is basically that 4,000 to 4,100 level or so on the BTC pair. Quantum's setting up here. It's pulling it back a little bit, so I'm watching this overhead trend line here. If it can break above that, then you could see another potential leg higher in quantum. Ripple also trying to clear a little bit of resistance, bouncing right into that resistance level right now. So many of these names have already hit that zone, so it's going to be interesting to see how they act going into this. But you're getting the idea here, just the same pattern showing up in a lot of names across the board. I'll look at a few more here real quick. Looking at ZIL, you can see ZIL sitting real tight here, trying to test this resistance. And so the pattern is very similar across the board. So if you start to see a few of these pop, there's a good chance that most of the other ones are going to follow suit, and vice versa. If these all start to fail here right at resistance and roll over, there's a good chance that most of them will follow suit and do the same thing. But as always, it will ultimately depend on what Bitcoin does here over the next day or so. So just to recap here, look at that 6,500 mark here in the next day or two. Just that's going to be really the key resistance level to see if we can rally above there, see if some of the shorts can start to cover again. Otherwise, you'll see another pullback attempt, and then I'll be looking for a higher low to be established there in that scenario. So that's going to be it for today, guys. I appreciate you watching. Hope everyone is having a wonderful day. Until next time, take care, everyone.